You're watching Africa Live. Let's get straight into our top story. South Sudan is, quote, back to war. That's according to the spokesperson of Vice President Riek Machar. The announcement comes after fresh fighting in the capital, Juba. Gun battles first broke out on Friday between Machar's forces and those loyal to President Salva Kiir. Government sources say at least 272 people were killed in those clashes. And on Sunday, fresh violence broke out. Gunfire could be heard in Juba, centered on the state security building. That's where Machar's troops are stationed. It's also the residence of the Vice President. The UN compound in the city also came under attack. The city is now on lockdown. Hundreds of civilians have reportedly fled the fighting. Now, there are conflicting reports out of Juba over whether or not war has indeed broken out. The country's information minister is calling on residents of the city to stay calm, and local media has been appealing to citizens not to panic.
Government has urged the public to remain calm in the national capital, Juba. The official government spokesperson, Michael Makwelweth, who is also the Minister of Information, Communication Technology and Postal Services, said the situation is under control. The minister urged the population in Juba to stay in their houses.
I call upon all our citizens not to panic, but to go back to their homes. Those who had vacated their homes should go back to their homes so that they stay there. The situation is normal and is under full control.
Well, let's get you an update from the ground now. CCTV's Patrick Oyet joins us live on the line from Juba. Patrick, we've just seen their voices of assurance coming from state authorities. But is South Sudan, in fact, back to war? What's the latest coming out of Juba, Patrick?
Well, the situation now is just similar to the one of 2013. Fighting has been going on. I have also managed to the spokesperson of the opposition military forces. He actually said that they were attacked by government forces. Government is also saying the opposite. There's accusation and counter-accusation. But fighting has been going on. Although I must say that it has subsided in the last 10 minutes as you are preparing to come on air, I'm sure. It has reduced a little bit. We are now hearing less and less gunshots. William Gadget Deng, the opposition's military spokesperson, has said lack of trust has now sunk in, and he added that both the president and his first Vice President Riek Machar have actually called on the public to calm, and there would be no fighting, but now there is fighting, so they do not trust the government anymore, even though he says that they are committed to implementing the peace deal. He says there is lack of trust, they don't trust the government, and that's why the fighting is continuing. The government, as you just rightly actually played the clip there, they have said that the situation is under control, the situation is now calm. Actually, that press conference was made by the Minister of Information, Honorable Michael Makwelweth, and the Minister of Mining, who is from opposition. He's actually the chief negotiator of the opposition, Kabanden guy. Both of them have said the military should stop fighting and they should follow the orders that were given by President Salva Kiir and his first Vice President Riek Machar. But fighting has been going on, except in the last 10 minutes that it has subsided. We do not know whether this is about rearming or the real fighting has now stopped. But that's how the situation is now.
Patrick Oyet, do stay safe, and thank you very much for that update. As we heard, despite calls for calm, there's been ongoing fighting in Juba, though it seems the fighting has briefly subsided now as it comes to evening. But let's bring you some perspective on where this fighting has been taking place. Let's now take a look at an aerial shot of Juba. Now, as you can see, the UN compound and state security offices are relatively close to each other. We've added the location of the Juba International Airport for some perspective. The gun battle started early Sunday morning. Now, you must remember, of course, that the state security building is also where Vice President Machar lives. Civilians have been seeking shelter at the UN compound, where Chinese peacekeepers were called upon to keep them and UN staff members safe. That compound came under attack. Several civilians were wounded. Over 20,000 displaced people have now sought safety at that airbase. Well, indeed, shock and anger tonight on social media following renewed violence in South Sudan. CCTV's Tuli Shabalala takes a look at those reactions.
Anger and frustration as the news hits that South Sudan's war may be back. Francis says both leaders need to resign. Another user has questioned mediation efforts by the African Union and called for that rapid response force the AU's been working to form. An angry Awal wants to know who will come up with a solution to save this country. This user sees a wider problem on the continent. While others chose to be more sympathetic, my thoughts and prayers are with you, South Sudan. Tuli Shabalala, CCTV.
Worrying developments indeed, and they're closely being watched by the African Union. Now, the AU summit started on Sunday in Kigali. CCTV's Jane Kier joins us now live from the city. Jane, of course, we've just been looking at all this rather disturbing news coming out of South Sudan. What's been the reaction from delegates there at the summit?
Well, Lindy, I'll tell you what, officials here have been tight-lipped. AU Chairperson Dlamini Zuma steered clear of this subject. Even as she officially opened the summit this morning, we've equally seen the same kind of reaction from the commissioners. Some of them have been choosing to use social media, of course, to condemn the violence and express their concerns. We've seen a tweet from the Commissioner of the African Union Peace and Security Council, Smail Chergui, saying that he's extremely concerned by the situation in Juba. But silently, Lindy, there's still a lot of concern, and there are critics who want more, to see more in terms of action from the African Union. Some of them are saying it's time the African Union stops being complacent on the two leaders. That's President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. Now, at this point, it's still unclear whether really President Kiir will actually make it for the summit by the end of this week. Lindy?
Well, Jane, as you say, leaders are rather tight-lipped at the summit itself, but surely the African Union must have a plan in terms of addressing this latest crisis and bringing a stop to the fighting.
Well, at this point, we really can't talk about any kind of plan from the African Union. The main body that's supposed to be dealing with the crisis in South Sudan at the African Union is the Peace and Security Council. So far, they've not really said any kind of, they've not released any kind of statement, save for that tweet from the Commissioner of the Peace and Security Council. Individually, though, we've seen some kind of reactions from presidents across the region. We've seen Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta calling for the demilitarization of Juba and asking the two leaders, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, to provide political leadership for the sake of peace in South Sudan. We've also seen reaction from Somali's president. Now, interestingly, Lindy, the South Sudan was still very much on the agenda at this summit. Delegates were supposed to discuss the establishment of a hybrid court that was meant to prosecute the crimes that have been committed in that country during the conflict over the last 3 years. Right now, we still don't know whether that will happen. Lindy?
All right, we'll leave it there for now, but thanks very much, Jane Kier, live for us there in Kigali. Well, that's outrage and concern also being expressed by leaders around the world following Friday's fighting in Juba. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon has called it yet another indication that neither side is committed to lasting peace.
Once again, trouble in Africa's youngest nation. With the death toll soaring, both President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar are denying any involvement. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon says he's deeply alarmed, adding that it was proof of lack of commitment to the peace process by both leaders. Kiir and Machar signed a peace deal in August last year meant to end the civil war, but both sides routinely accuse each other of attacks. Ban says the violence must end and those responsible should be brought to book. Civilians are once again worst affected. They've been flocking UN bases where peacekeepers are assisting them. A Chinese peacekeeping battalion has been tasked to keep civilians and UN staff safe. Britain and Kenya have meanwhile moved to extract their citizens out of South Sudan, and the United States is calling for calm. Catherine Omwando, CCTV.